Last time, we stripped this Bianchi Boardwalk down to its soul and called it a single speed. It was minimalist, it was pure, it was also kind of a mistake. Today, we're ending the experiment and putting gears back on where they belong. But the bike gods are clearly punishing me for my indecisions. I thought this would be a weekend swap, but between proprietary Suntor cables that don't exist and a budget shifters that are essentially useless, this build has become a comedy of errors. Sit back, let's see if I can actually make this Bianchi shift again, or if I've finally met my match. The first step in reversing the single speed experiment is simple enough, or at least on paper. I'm unhooking the quick links and pulling the chain past the single chain ring. It's the last time this bike will ever be this uncomplicated. Next, the chain tensioner comes off. We won't be needing that where we're going. Some might call this tensioner a clean solution. I call it a reminder of a phase I'm ready to leave behind. Now, the rear wheel is out of the way, and we're down to the real work, the crank arms. I'll start by backing out the center nut on the drive side. Then it's time for the crank puller. We carefully thread in the outer body of the puller into the crank arm, making sure it's all the way in. Next, I thread the pusher part in the tool clockwise. It will get snug, and with a bit of force, the arm will come off. We'll repeat the exact same dance on the non-drive side. The bike is stripped, but that gritty resistance I felt in the crank arms means I'm diving into the bottom bracket next. I'll start by removing the lock ring. Next, I'll use this special bottom bracket tool to loosen the cup. Once loose, I can unscrew it by hand. This exposes the bearings and spindle. Now onto the drive side. I'll use my adjustable wrench to get purchase on the drive side cup, and with a bit of effort, the cup is loose and I can easily unscrew it by hand from here. With the bottom bracket removed, it's time to remove the old gummy grease. I'll start by placing all of the parts in a bin and soaking them with Dawn Power Wash. This is an excellent degreaser and helps the process of cleaning these dirty parts. I'll do a little bit of scrubbing with an old toothbrush, and I toss the parts into the ultrasonic cleaner basket. With the basket full, it's time to prep the solution. I use a generous amount of dish soap. That's all it normally takes. Lastly, I load the basket and crank the heat up and set the timer for 30 minutes. While the bottom bracket takes its bath, we'll remove the single speed freewheel. This one uses the same tool as a normal bottom bracket. Since it wasn't on there long, it came off with minimal effort. The timer's up on the ultrasonic bath for the bottom bracket. Let's see how well this worked. I take each part out one by one and dry them off. The ultrasonic cleaner did its job and the bottom bracket looks as good as new. Back inside, we need to prep the threads where the bottom bracket will live. I'll use some Dawn Power Wash and give the bottom bracket a good flossing. Now it's time to install the freshly cleaned bottom bracket. We'll start by applying some grease to the threads. I'll start on the drive side. First, we pack the bearings with grease and insert them into the cup. Next, we screw the cup in place and finally tighten it down with the bottom bracket tool. With the drive side cup in place, we can insert the spindle. Slide it in from the non-drive side carefully. Now it's time to prep the non-drive side bearings and screw in that cup. I'll use these pliers to get a better grip. I'll make sure to test the compression of the bearings and make sure I have everything set properly before I install the lock ring. With the lock ring installed, the bottom bracket installation is complete. It's time to take the drive side crank arm and undo what we did in the last video. I'll remove this chain ring to make room for our work. With a clean slate, it's as easy as aligning the two large chain rings and tightening the bolts. Lastly, we flip the crank arm over and screw down the small ring. The crank arm is now whole again. No more single speed here. With the drive side arm whole again, it's time to put it back in its happy home. I'll slide the crank arm over the spindle and tighten the bolt down nice and tight. We'll repeat this process on the non-drive side. Boy, these crank arms sure spin a lot better now. Now it's time to replace the parts that make this bike shift. At the center of the bike, I'll reinstall the front derailleur. I'll align the cage with the chain ring and tighten it down. At the rear of the bike, I'll install the rear derailleur. I'll first place a small amount of grease on the threads, then I'll tighten the bolt that holds the derailleur in place. Lastly, I'll test the full range of motion. The rear wheel is next on the docket. I'll first remove the old grease with a rag. Then I'll thread on the 7-speed freewheel where a single gear once lived. After replacing the quick release skewer, we return the wheel to its happy home. Here's where things started to go south. I really wanted to recable these Suntour shifters that came with the bike. Easy enough, I thought. But when I got them open and examined the cables that came with the shifters, something wasn't quite right. The cable end is not the same as modern shifters. They look kind of like brake cables, but the end is smaller. I checked for a little bit, but couldn't find any shifter cables that would work. So I went to Amazon and ordered these. I've used something similar in the past with great success, so I thought these would be a great bargain at only $10. That should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. Once these were installed, I could immediately tell the quality was just not there. The cable pulls were inconsistent, and the ratchet often skipped under load. These also required a great force to shift from one gear to the next. I tried everything and even straightened the derailleur hanger a bit, all without any luck. I should have passed on these inexpensive shifters. I guess I learned my lesson. So back to Amazon, and I ordered these to replace the junk I ordered earlier. It took a couple of days for these to arrive at my doorstep. The wait is over. Let's see if these work any better. I install the rear shifter on the handlebars. Unravel the cable, feed it through the cable housing, and route it towards the rear of the bike. At the rear of the bike, I feed the cable through more housing, then through the derailleur and tighten the cable down. Before we can test things, we'll need to install the chain. I'll feed it through the front derailleur, then carefully route it past the jockey wheels of the rear derailleur. Once that's complete, I'll use the quick links to join the chain together. Finally, I'll turn the crank arms to make sure things are good. It's time to adjust the shifting on these new shifters. These are night and day difference from the $10 junk I had first ordered. Each shift feels crisp, clean, and takes minimal effort. With a barrel adjuster on the shifter itself, dialing in the shifting is now an easy chore. No more walking back and forth between the front and the rear of the bike. After a few minor adjustments, I have the shifting working great. With the front shifter installed off camera, we find ourselves at the center of the bike, attaching the shift cable to the front derailleur. Once that's set, we can test the shifting. The chain is reluctantly moving back to the small cog, and I spot the issue. The cage is not exactly parallel with the chain rings. After a small adjustment, things are working much better. With the bike shifting again, it's time for the final touches. I'll start by snipping the cables and attaching cable ends. Now we'll replace the brake levers and handlebar grips. Finally, we'll reconnect the brakes and give them a quick test. The experiment is finally over. We've gone from pure back to practical, and my knees are already sending me a thank you note. Single speeds are great in theory, but unless you enjoy suffering for the sake of minimalism, gears are the way to go. This Bianchi finally feels like a real bike again, rather than a rolling monument to a bad decision. Let this be a lesson. Cheap is the most expensive way to fix a bike. Those bargain bin shifters were a personal insult. If I hadn't swapped them, my hammer would have probably been doing a lot more than just persuading today. Thanks for watching the struggle. If you made it this far, you're a true champion. If you enjoyed this video, show that thumbs up button some love and subscribe for more bicycle mechanic adventures.